Hello every pony. In this video I'm going to be discussing Ashe once again, but I will also be discussing their role in my character's story. Ashe is intended to be a protagonist of some sort, maybe even an anti-hero. I think that's the closest type of character trope I've heard of that comes close to what they would be. I can't quite describe it because I'm not all that well versed in story making, the specifics of it, everything that constitutes a story. All I know is I like to make the most basic of basic stories, and this happens to be one of those. I actually have a summary on my toy house at this moment, and you can read a brief summary at the time of recording this. The main summary only has part 1 up. This is part 1 of 3 parts. But the main point is Ashe is a main character in my story. And the other main character that is basically their foil or their opposite, who is the antagonist, would be Bailey. He is the villain, he is the nasty guy, he is the douchebag, he is our most hated character. Once we actually find out who he is, though, that's not quite visible at the very start of the main story, that is. If you read the backstory, which is part 1 of the main story summary, you will know and understand why Bailey is such a piece of shit. Essentially, the reason he is such a bad person as a character is because he is an abusive stalker. He stalks people he develops his obsessions with. He harasses them. He may have abused them if he's stalking them because they broke up with him. He may abuse them after he begins stalking them and they have a relationship with him. That would be the case with Ashe. In their relationship, he does turn to psychological abuse. This is after Ashe makes it clear to him that they are not interested in him and that they instead have a girlfriend who they're monogamously interested in. And before Ashe, Bailey's main obsession was his ex-girlfriend, Valentine, who of course dated him. She found out what an abusive jerk he was, and she broke the relationship off eventually after dealing with him for so long. But after Valentine broke up with Bailey, Bailey's abuse and harassment got even worse, to the point of killing animals and leaving them outside of her room window, that is. He would intentionally do this to upset Valentine's abusive father, who in turn took out his aggression on Valentine. This is mostly because Bailey is aware of her situation with her father and wants to make it worse out of spite. Eventually, after his harassment of Valentine gets really bad, he discovers things on the deep web. Of course, we always have to incorporate that deep web element. And of course, Bailey finds some disturbing fuck shit online, and this doesn't result in much. What he does do eventually is find or receive a message with some coordinates, which happen to be nearby at an abandoned elementary school. So what he does is tell his friend to show up, his friend who is completely unrelated, who actually disappears after this, and we do not care about him. Do not ask about him. No one cares. I don't care. I don't care about the friend. He's not relevant. Anyway, the friend follows Bailey's instructions, and they show up. Specifically, it's a dude, so he shows up. He shows up to the school for Bailey in order to see what's up, because Bailey basically told him, show up to this with me. It's gonna be a good time. It isn't a good time. He gets kidnapped, goes missing, never heard from again. Bailey finds out. He goes back to the school to find out what's going on, and he eventually gets knocked out in the school, kidnapped. He wakes up on an operating table like, what the hell is going on? And on that, he sees a mysterious man, and this man injects him with a tranquilizer to put him out. He wakes up on the operating table again later, only to be told the operation was a success, and to which he was never informed anything more on what happened. All he knows is, after this, he is put out once again. He wakes up at the school that he was kidnapped at, and he notices after some time, after going home, he does not mention this to anyone because he doesn't feel it's a very big deal, at least to himself. He's been through some majorly bizarre events, and considering the type of person he is, he doesn't want to admit that he has more information than he lets on about the whole situation of people previously showing up to that school and going missing. He's worried he will become a suspect for the person causing these people to go missing. One of those people, including his old friend, who is gone, never heard from again. We don't care about him, don't ask about him. Basically, though, what happened, which isn't explained in the story, is that he has at this point become a demon through transfer of organs. He was given an organ transplant. I'm not quite sure which organ it is yet. It's definitely a major one. Most presumably his heart was transplanted, and what he received was the heart of a demon. And when I say demon, I mean my own species, which is not the classic demon. It is instead a monster whose true form is a manifestation of their psychological state. Technically, all of their forms, including the typical human one, is a manifestation of their psychological state at the time, but it changes depending on their psychological state, of course. Their emotions, their emotional stability, mostly. Things like that. That will have an effect on how they look and what abilities they have at the time. Ashe is actually partially one of these types of monsters. They come in 3 categories: demons, which are in the middle of stability, there are angels, who are the most physically stable, and there are dream children, which is a species I named myself, which happens to be the same as the other ones, only it is the most unstable of the trio of species, which are basically manifestations of our personalities, our brains. So, that would be what Bailey is now. Ashe happens to be half of Dreamchild and half human. This was an anomaly when it comes to their birth. They were not supposed to be born because that is not supposed to be possible. These types of monsters are not they are not fertile, you would say, for some people. They are not able to breed. They are not able to have offspring. Essentially, I'm currently calling the story Oddity. Ashe's birth was an oddity. Shouldn't have happened. Little weird. And that's the basic gist. So, Bailey is now an oddity. He is a demon. He is a psychological monster. And after this, he continues stalking Valentine, harassing her. He eventually meets up with her to finally admit, hey, I've been the one doing this to you. To which Valentine is like, yeah, I can tell. I just haven't gone to anyone because you kind of terrify me, and I know you will escalate it if I do. So Bailey's like, yeah. They eventually get into an argument in which Bailey physically attacks Valentine. Now, it would have been a murder, only the physical contact with their bodies at the time of Valentine's death is what transfers this illness to Valentine. And when I say illness, I mean what turned Bailey into a demon. His heart transplant. The combination of body part, almost, just the physical contact plus her death equals Valentine is now a demon as well. It doesn't make as much sense as I would like it to, but it makes enough for me, and it is my story. I'm not doing anything serious with it, so I hope you don't take it too seriously, because I certainly don't. I just have an interest in it to where I can talk about it a lot. So, now Valentine is a demon, Bailey is a demon. Bailey kind of freaks out after he thinks he killed Valentine and she's never coming back. So he kind of leaves that situation alone. He moves on to other people, mostly via social media, apps that you match with people who are nearby, and namely, Tinder. He uses Tinder to find people who are nearby in order to hook up with, in order to find dates with, in order to find victims with. Because he is just that terrible a person. He finds people online or through apps, and with this, he finds more victims, more people to use to his advantage, more people to just use. And that is how he finds Ashe. On Tinder, Ashe is actually looking for a plug. At this point, they have developed a dependence on opioids. They use painkillers a lot simply because they are very addictive and they cause a high feeling. They are kind of nice under the right circumstances to feel, but they are not good to abuse the way Ashe is doing. Anyway, the two match, and Bailey falsely tells Ashe that he is a plug, in which they believe it, and that gains him their friendship. And they form a very vague friendship. They're not super close, they never become super close, but Bailey does develop an obsession with Ashe that goes way out of hand. He goes way too far with this, and they begin to notice. They take a little distance with the relationship, and I can describe more in a later video, but Ashe catches on to some weird stuff that Bailey's been giving off, and they just take a break from him, which he does not like. Anyway, that would be the basics of the first half, I would say, of my story. So, thank you for listening and watching the video. I hope you like the more realistic Ashe attempt behind the voice. So, if you have any recommendations or requests for stories you may want to hear or certain speed paints, feel free to tell me in the comments, and I will see what I can do. Thank you again for watching the video, and I will see you guys another day. Goodbye.